Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to be exploring the timelines of the Sony universe. So we're talking Toby, Andrew, and Miles and their respective Spider-Men, and of course Morbius and Venom. Now it's all the more important to do this because Across the Spider-Verse has basically tied all of this together, including tying into the MCU. So we will see how they tie into that timeline as well. So without further ado, let's dive right in and see what we can find out. So right off the bat, I do need to thank both Drew and Robbie. Man, your research into all of this was so incredibly helpful. I mean, you guys are superheroes, let's face it. In fact, we'll make you superheroes. There we go, very appropriate. Now, and I spent hours in Photoshop making this beautiful image. I hope you're honored by it. All right, anyway, guys, you rock. Thank you. Couldn't have done it without you. Okay, so let's dive right into this, and we will start with, obviously, Toby's first movie, and I'm going to show the villains' images because they so immediately make you think of which movies we're talking about. So in this case, the first Spider-Man movie. When does it happen in the timeline? Well, we get a good clue as to when the movie starts because it's very close to graduation. MJ is talking about the fact that Flash is just happy you didn't give him a black eye for graduation. So we must be close enough that the black eye wouldn't have healed in time for graduation. All right. Also, we can look at the novels, which for the most part, I like to stick to just the movies and not look at outside of the movies. But if they do help inform us of the dates and they fit into the canon, all the better. And this is extremely helpful. So the Daily Bugle story of Spider-Man 2 tells us that Ben Parker died 2 years before April of 2004. So April of 2002 is when he died. That's really, really helpful in placing the movie and, in fact, placing all the movies, to be honest. So we're going to go with that, April of 2002. Okay, it's important about the 2002 because we do get a newspaper, and we love when you get the dates, right? Other than the date is October 21st of 2001. So is it 2001 or is it 2002? Well, first of all, October 21st of 2001 is not a Monday. However, October 21st of 2002 is a Monday. So I'm going to go with the fact that they got the Monday and the October 21st correct and the 2001 incorrect because 2002 seems to fit with other things we saw like that novel. All right. Then we also know that the Goblin's fight with Spider-Man was after Thanksgiving or close around Thanksgiving because, of course, they're having that Thanksgiving dinner. Happy Thanksgiving, sir, MJ says. And then the funeral for the Goblin was a few weeks later, so we're talking in December. So there you go. Not too bad, right? Starts in April, goes to December of 2002. Okay, Spider-Man 2. So we learn on that one that Aunt May is thinking back on Uncle Ben's death. She says it was 2 years ago next month since he was taken. It's another reason why that April date is so important, April of 2002, because this tells us this movie is March of 2004, because it's 2 years less 1 month since Uncle Ben passed away. Great. We also see that Mary Jane's wedding is Monday, April 26th, which Monday of April 26th works in 2004. So that's nice. Perfect. And then also we do see a newspaper article about a police investigation into Osborn's death, and notice it's dated June 9th of 2003, placing it in between the two movies. So great. This all works out perfectly. It starts in March and goes to April of 2004. Also, I have some bonus content you might want to check out. I have a pinned comment for this video that has the YouTube links for all of these different things. And in this case, there are some promos for Spider-Man 2 that are really funny. Now, I do not believe they are canon because they literally are talking about Spider-Man 2 in the video, which that would not make sense. However, it's still worth watching because anytime you get extra footage of J.K. Simmons, it's a good day. So check it out if you want. Again, it's in a pinned comment. I have a link to all of these different things. Okay, so there you go. Now we move on to Spider-Man 3. So this one starts with Peter walking down the sidewalk there, and we see that the Best Musical winner of 2005, the Tony Award winner, is listed. And that happens to be Spam-A-Lot, which, for those that don't know, is a Monty Python. Monty Python rocks, but a Monty Python musical. In real life, that musical did indeed win the Tony Award in June of 2005. So that's basically saying that poster just went up. You can see how fresh it is. And that places the movie beginning in June of 2005. Then the movie ends before August because Aunt May says we'd be married 50 years come August. Well, she wouldn't say that if it was in August, right? So really, this really tightly puts the movie in June to July. Also, just another timeline thing of interest is that Peter mentions it's been 2 years since, at least 2 years since the first movie. Because remember, they learn that there's a second killer, that it wasn't just the one that he got in the first movie, it's also Flint Marko of Uncle Ben. And he's saying, hey, you're telling me it's been 2 years that you've had these suspicions? So obviously this movie is at least 2 years since the first movie. All right, so that, remember, it's real tight timeline from June to July of 2005, and again, a nice solid 2 years from the first movie. So there you go. The Tobey movies fit really nicely into the timeline. All right, let's move on to Andrew. So Andrew's first movie. So they don't give us a lot of specific dates here at the beginning, but there is a calendar, which if you look at those days and where they fall in the month, it has to be January of 2013. Nothing else fits around that time frame. And it also fits well because there's another calendar that shows up in Gwen's apartment there, and it is March of 2013. So it looks like the movie starts in January and proceeds to at least March. The March is shown again there with the registration. Notice 3 of 13. And then also so this is kind of interesting. On Tumblr, when the movie came out, there were some Daily Bugle, not just some, lots of Daily Bugle articles. They are still out there, and I do have in the pinned comment a link in case you want to go read them. You could spend hours reading them. There is a ton. And they are presumably in-universe information. But in this case, this one kind of helps us because it says that the New York City Coroner's Office yesterday positively identified the badly decomposed body found in the sewers beneath Lower Manhattan of Dr. Aratha, who was 46, formerly of Oscorp, and notice he was born in March of 1967. Well, if you do that math, that fits very well with March of 2013. So pretty cool. They really did try to keep all this stuff fitting together. And by the way, I should mention, don't worry about the November 15th, 2013 date. That's when this was posted on Tumblr, not so much when the article would have been written or when it happened. So focus on the article itself, not so much on the dates. Also, another interesting thing, I think this one's kind of cool, also on that Tumblr. It says that in the 4 months since the terrorist attack on Oscorp, which of course is in the movie, violent crime went way up. So notice, in March, boom, you got a big spike. So it really ties everything into this March date and how key that is. Okay, and then there's an epilogue after Captain Stacy's death. So a little bit later, but not much. So we're talking in April, and that's when Peter decides maybe he won't necessarily keep that promise. And oh my goodness, the chemistry between these two, my goodness, so amazing. One of the highlights of Andrew's movies, obviously, were these two together. Okay, so that is January to April of 2013. And then also, as a bonus, check out lots of content. I have links to all of this. These are, again, they're promos, but unlike the Spider-Man 2 from Tobey's stuff, these actually, I think, are canon. If you watch them, they fit perfectly. So we have interviews from Captain Stacy, interviews, not so much interviews, but video recordings from Dr. Connors before he became the Lizard, and some Oscorp promos. So these would all fit around the March timeframe because it's obviously before Captain Stacy died and before Connors fully became the Lizard. But check it out. They're pretty cool. They're worth watching. Okay, so now we move on to Amazing Spider-Man 2. So when does this happen? Well, we go back again to the Tumblr for some interesting, helpful things here. Again, forget about the May 14th, 2014 date. That doesn't matter. That's when it was posted to Tumblr. But there's an interview happening on the 1-year anniversary of the Lizard's attack on Manhattan and the death of Captain Stacy. And also notice, in that interview, Gwen, number one, is alive. So that's important. This is happening before Amazing Spider-Man 2. And also talking about her upcoming graduation. So the really important thing to pick up here is this means there is at least 1 year between Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. Okay, and the graduation is coming up soon. So, hey, look at that. Movie starts with graduation. So that works perfectly, right? Movie starts in June, and we know it's a year later, so June of 2014. We also know it takes place in 2014 because they tell us, because that's when Norman Osborn dies. And then the movie moves from June to early fall because they talk about allergy season. And notice they're wearing warmer clothing. And again, these two's chemistry, Amazing. Just amazing. Then the movie moves from early fall to winter when Gwen does die, and notice him at the gravesite where we're at early fall and then late fall and then winter. So it moves into winter and then jumps forward 5 months for the epilogue when he fights the Rhino, because notice the news report is saying there was a disappearance of Spider-Man 5 months ago. So he really hasn't been around since that time. Okay, so we have, therefore, a June of 2014 to March of 2015 timeframe for the Amazing Spider-Man 2. All right, so then we move on to the first Venom. So when does this happen? Well, when Eddie is sneaking a peek at Annie's laptop, he sees an email that mentions an annual meeting for 2018. So presumably the movie is starting in 2018. And this one is a little tricky. This movie is a little tricky to place on its own. So we're just going to have to take a bunch of different things and put them all together. But so we know there's an annual meeting being mentioned in 2018. Great. We also know it jumps forward 6 months. Okay? Keep that in mind. That's about it, though. Now we have to go to some other sources. And one of those sources being Venom Let There Be Carnage. Because we learned from Andy Serkis in a behind-the-scenes video, he says there's a year and a half since the last story. So the end of the first Venom movie is a year and a half before the beginning of Let There Be Carnage. Okay? Helpful. Also, we do hear from the movie, from Venom Let There Be Carnage, Eddie's being interviewed, and they say to him, hey, multiple dead bodies at your building last year, the bizarre outburst at the lobster restaurant, etc. So the key there is last year. There is at least a year between Venom Let There Be Carnage and Venom, and of course, Andy Serkis tells us it's specifically a year and a half. Great. So when does Venom Let There Be Carnage happen? It is in October of 2020. They make that really clear because Eddie's working on a draft document and it's dated October of 2020. Okay, so this finally gives us enough to put some things together. If Let There Be Carnage starts in October of 2020 and then Venom ends a year and a half before that, and then there was the 6-month time jump before that, we can put it all together with the movie starting in October of 2018 and ending in April of 2019. There's the 6-month jump. And then we have the year and 6 month to October of 2020. Whew. Man, they did not make that one easy, right? Okay. Luckily, Into the Spider-Verse is incredibly easy. They make it crystal clear when this happens. So first of all, Miles has a test that he intentionally bombs, and he dates it as December 2nd of 2018. Obviously, he's just messing around there, but December and 2018 are important because they get shown again. We see that Peter Parker's year of death is 2018. Great. We also see a poster at one point, December 17th. Okay, there's December and 2018 again, making it really clear that's when this is happening. On top of that, we see a lot of snowfall. We see them making snowmen, etc. That was a really funny scene, by the way, with the snowman. So we know it's winter time. And if there was any doubt that it was December, there's a Christmas album, A Very Spidey Christmas, playing on the laptop at one point. Okay, so there you go. There's no way around it. This is December of 2018. They make that very, very clear. Also, as a bonus, I do have a link to Spider-Ham's adventure, Caught in a Ham, which is really cute. And this is really interesting because besides being fun to watch, it's real short, but it's really funny. It also shows us how Spider-Ham gets pulled through the portal in the movie. So literally this little special occurs during Into the Spider-Verse. So if you've never seen it, it's worth checking it out. It's pretty, like I say, it's pretty short, but pretty funny. Okay, so now we move on to Morbius. So what do we know about Morbius? Well, Morbius mentions Venom. That's what puts Morbius and Venom in the same specific universe when he says, I am Venom. Okay, great. Then we also know Venom Let There Be Carnage mentions Morbius. Notice in the middle there, the tree there, it says the real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the dark, and it shows a bat. So it seems pretty clear that Cletus, who was drawing all these images on the wall, is aware of Morbius. So that means Morbius is in between the first and second Venom movies. Okay, that's helpful. What else do we know? Now this is interesting. So Morbius did have some TikToks to promote it. And several times they show a Daily Bugle newspaper. So I've enlarged it, and so I want to show how this tells us exactly when the movie happens. This is really pretty cool, that we're going to find out it is indeed June, mid-June of 2019. So in the upper right-hand corner, they have LXXXXVIII. Well, they kind of mess up their Roman numerals because you never have 4 X's. So we're going to give them some grace and assume they meant 3 X's. But that is 87, meaning it is the 87th year of publication. Okay? Then they also tell us they've been making the newspaper since 1932. 1932 plus 87 is 2019. Then we see again in the upper right-hand corner, this is the 162nd daily edition of the Daily Bugle. So day number 162 is June 11th of 2019. Wow. So other than the fact that they really pressed way too many X's there and they don't know their Roman numerals like they should, otherwise this is perfect. So okay, Morbius is in June of 2019. Problem solved. And we're going to see that does place it in between the 2 Venom movies when we get the Let There Be Carnage here on the timeline. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, there are a bunch of Morbius TikTok promos. I do have a link to those in the pinned comment. I will warn you in advance, they're pretty cringe. I was not impressed. I'm not blaming the actress. She tried her best. In fact, she's a social media expert, Nikki Marina. On her other stuff, she's really good. I just think they gave her... Well, they gave her a script about as bad as the movie itself, right? But bump. Anyway, check it out if you want. They are out there. I mean, it's worth a watch if you've never seen them. Okay, then we move on to Across the Spider-Verse. So what does it tell us? Well, unfortunately, I can't get screenshots from it because it isn't out yet. But I guarantee you in the movie, Miles says it's been 1 year and 4 months since his last movie. And in fact, Christopher Miller in this tweet confirms that. Discussing film, said it's 1 year later, and he said, well, actually 1 year and 4 months. But really, both of those time frames are given in the movie. It's kind of interesting. Gwen, her story at the beginning of the movie picks up 1 year after the first movie, which means then, since she immediately goes off and joins the Spider Force, Miguel and the Spider Society, that she's been with him for 4 months. That's kind of interesting. So she's had 4 months to drink the Kool-Aid, if you will, of Miles' view of the universe. So anyway, but more importantly is Miguel's view of the universe. Because in my opinion, Miguel is pretty dogmatic about things and doesn't really, I'm not sure he's 100% right about everything he says. But anyway, he convinced Gwen in those 4 months to trust him. So there you go, 1 year and 4 months between the 2 movies. So that places Across the Spider-Verse in April of 2020. Great. Okay, how about Venom, Let There Be Carnage? Well, we know that Shriek has been at Ravencroft for 25 years because in a behind-the-scenes video, Andy Serkis tells us she has been kept in a box at Ravencroft for 25 years. Great, okay? Then in the movie, they tell us that she was brought there in 1996. Now, 1996 plus 25 gives us 2021, and we're going to see evidence that it's really late 2020. So probably Andy Serkis was rounding up when he said the 25 years. Now, obviously, it's canon in the movie that she went in 1996, but when Andy Serkis said 25, he probably meant 24 and, 9 months. So anyway, he rounded up. That's great. Because if you remember from earlier, we do see this firm date placing it in October of 2020. In fact, that's a draft that he's working on there. Okay, so so it starts in October, but we believe it more evidence that's in October is notice there's a Halloween party, or it could be a Dia de los Muertos, probably butchered that, sorry, party, one of the two. But that's where Venom goes, and I love the visuals in this scene. It's kind of a goofy scene, but the visuals are just stellar. So anyway, this again is evidence of October. And then, as I mentioned earlier also, Andy Serkis says there's 1.5 years between the 2 movies, so that helps. And in the movie itself, they mentioned that the previous movie was at least 1 year ago. They mentioned just last year. So, with the fact that the movie spans more than just 1 month, that pushes into November for the finale of the movie. Sorry. So therefore, we have October to November of 2020 for Venom: Let There Be Carnage. And then I am going to go ahead and add on No Way Home, because No Way Home is so important, obviously. It brings in Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man, it brings in Venom, it brings in 5 villains, and Across the Spider-Verse references it. So we need to put this on the timeline, and then we're going to do some interesting analysis. So when does this movie happen? Okay, well, Far From Home, which of course immediately precedes No Way Home, it starts at the end of their school year, which is June. So we know it starts in June, and then they go on summer break into July. But what year? Well, we know the year is 2024 because Betty mentions 8 months ago is when everybody came back from the blip, which of course we know is 2023. So that puts the movie in June to July of 2024. No Way Home picks up immediately starting in July, but then the main part of the movie, the key part of the movie, is right after Halloween, so early November, because they talk about taking down those Halloween decorations. That's when Spider-Man, the spell goes wrong and he gets in the battle with Doctor Strange. And then, of course, the end of the movie, the epilogue, has a real brief scene swinging over New York in December. Okay, so we can place it from July to December of 2024. All right. So what do we do with all this? Well, let's do a little bit of analysis on how this all fits together, or in some cases doesn't necessarily fit together. All right. Oh, sorry. One more thing I want to mention is there are some awesome promos for both Far From Home and No Way Home. So Far From Home has some dailybugle.net promos. They're in my pinned comment. And then the No Way Home has some TikToks. All of these are funny. I mean, a few of them are a little but most of these are epic. And of course, again, J.K. Simmons is back. Love it. Absolutely love it. All right. So as I was saying, let's analyze how well this timeline fits together or how well it doesn't once we start talking about the multiverse. So first of all, it is interesting that the Venom, Morbius, and Spider-Verse movies are about 4 years, three years from present day in our real world, but 4 or 5 years in the past from the MCU standpoint, which is happening mostly in 2025 now. So what do we do with that? Should they really be that far back? Well, Across the Spider-Verse did something interesting. I'm just not sure it's canon. Or whether it's an accident. But Across the Spider-Verse does show us some security monitors that have 4 different times the same date, July 11th of 2023. Sometimes you can't trust stuff that shows up on a computer or a phone, etc., because it may just be the date that things were filmed and it was an accident that it showed up in the film. This is an animated movie. They intentionally put this in here. It's not the day the movie was filmed. They're trying to tell us, I think, that present day is July 11th of 2023. So if we go back to this, does that mean they're trying to advance things forward into more present day? It's weird that it's July, because that's 3 months and 3 years, 2023. Like they moved it forward 3 months and 3 years. I would rather it have been 3 years exactly, but for the minute, let's advance everything. Boom. So now Across the Spider-Verse is in July of 2023, and everything else also moved forward a year and 3 months. But now you've got Into the Spider-Verse in March, and we saw there was a Christmas Christmas album playing. And I guess it could still be winter and snow in March. It is New York, but still, I don't know. I don't know if that was intentional that they did this or not. I'm just bringing it up because it is interesting that things are so far in the past. But if they're going to advance, Sony, if you're going to do this, please don't make it 3 years and 3 months. Just make it 3 years, period. That'll work much better. Anyway, I'm not going to move it forward. For now, I'm going to assume that was, I guess, a mistake. It's hard to call animated stuff a mistake, but I'm going to call it a mistake, and we're going to stick with these dates for now. I'm just bringing that up so you're aware. Okay, so how about the fact that Spot travels to Venom's universe in April of 2020, because I'm not going to move the dates forward. So April of 2020, does this work? Yeah, it does. It would mean that Spot traveled into Venom's universe prior to Venom Let There Be Carnage. All right, that works. So there's no problem there. What about No Way Home? When did everybody get pulled into No Way Home? Well, all the villains, other than Sandman, which I'll mention him in a second, but all the other 4 villains presumably were pulled from the points of their deaths in the movies, or from the time of the movie. So that's already a little weird that the spell pulled people from the past, but hey, It's magic that went wrong. So whatever. Sandman seemed like he was more present day from Toby's timeline. So he may have been pulled, from later in the timeline. But okay, so those villains were pulled from then. Venom is kind of weird, right? Venom would have been pulled from 4 years in the past. I mean, did you get from watching Let There Be Carnage that there was 4 years between the main movie and the epilogue? Because I didn't get that. But that's the only way that could work, is that he was pulled from the past. So that's kind of weird. And then you've got Andrew and Toby, who presumably would be pulled from present day of their timelines. I mean, they certainly had aged since their original movies. However, to make it even more confusing, there was an interview where it was implied that Toby came from the future. Now, you get that by adding the math. The interview doesn't say he's from the future, but the interview does say, where is Toby? We're not de-agifying him. He's a guy who's 43 who's entering this movie. Okay, so they're saying he's 43. Well, we saw that he graduated from high school in 2002. So if you advance that forward, that's like 2027. Huh. So that means theoretically Toby was pulled from the future. So you got villains pulled from the past, Venom from the past, presumably Andrew from the present, and maybe Toby from the future. Wild. So I don't know what to make of all that. They got to tell us what's official. But because this is just an interview. They could have been wrong and got the math wrong. But it does at least open the door that you can be pulled from the future. Interesting. Okay. Now let's talk about a crazy one. So in Across the Spider-Verse, which takes place in April of 2020, Miguel talks about No Way Home. Mentions Doctor Strange and the little nerd from Earth 199999. But that hadn't happened yet, kind of. Or did it? It's just, this starts to get really weird. Now, granted, Miguel, on top of all the weirdness, he's Spider-Man 2099. So theoretically, he's from the future, way in the future. So I don't know. But nonetheless, it was present day in Miles' universe of April of 2020. So who knows, right? I guess Miguel just knows lots of things, including the future. Anyway, very interesting. So tell me your thoughts in the comments about that. Does that bother you? Here's, though, what is really interesting. And whereas some of these things I think are accidents because Sony and Marvel weren't necessarily working together, and Sony Animated Studios weren't necessarily working with Sony Live Action, but this is interesting. In Multiverse of Madness, it does seem to imply that different universes are working on different points in their timelines. So, remember, Doctor Strange gets pulled into 838 when he and America go crazy through all the portals. So it's present day in 838. There's a scene then where Christine Palmer puts Doctor Strange's hand from 616 on the left and Doctor Strange's hand from 838 on the right, and she's comparing the damage to his hands to see how similar they are. But here's what's interesting. So on the right, 838's Doctor Strange, that would have been the date of his injury. So it really doesn't matter as much what that date is. But the date on the left is fascinating. So if we zoom in, it's 2/12/2023. Well, Multiverse of Madness happens in November of 2024. So does that mean that 838, present day in 838, the time that they went into 838, is it not the same as the present day in the 616 universe? I mean, that's really wild to think about. Now, this could be another one of those, oops, we put the wrong thing on there. But no, this was filmed way before 2023, right? It came out before 2023, for goodness sake. So they had to intentionally put this in there. Interesting. Really interesting. So the bottom line is, each of these universes, I guess, you can go to different time frames in each of them. I mean, we saw in Endgame, for example, they went back in the past. So, but that was intentional. They intentionally went back in the past. In these cases, it seems like just traveling between universes, it may not be the same present day that it was in your universe. Wow, right? Tell me what you think about all this. I would love to know what others are thinking. I'm mainly throwing all this out there. I don't really have all the answers other than with that Multiverse of Madness, it sure seems like Marvel is saying, we did this on purpose. we are saying that you can jump to different present days when you jump to different universes. All right, there we go. That's the analysis of the Sony Spider-Man timeline. I did go ahead and update my Google Drive, and I do have a pinned a comment that has a link to this if you want to go out there, because I added the new Sony Spider-Man timeline, and I also updated the MCU timeline spreadsheet with some of this information. And of course, don't forget, we do have a Discord, and you guessed it, that's also in the same pinned comment. It's a really big comment. But I'd love to have you join. Lots of people, time zones across the whole world, always some great conversations going on. And here we are talking about Spider-Verse in this case. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.